Hey all. So in this video, what we're going to talk about is how Jaggar is thinking about emotions. Now, it's important to point out here that she's not developing like a full-blown theory about emotions. What she's doing is she's sketching a handful of features that inform her analysis later on. And she admits that she's not giving a full-blown theory of emotions here, but rather making some observations that sort of fit with our intuitive ways of thinking about emotions. Okay, at least perhaps intuitive. So she begins by giving like a target view, right? Something she's really going to pick on. And that's what she calls the dumb view. The dumb view is that emotions are felt disruptions that are felt disruptions of other mental processes. So when people say things like, like think rationally, right? Don't think with your emotions or don't be emotional. I think that those are views that spring out of this dumb view of emotions. That is, that emotions are disruptions of some kind. You might even put it as that. Put it this way: that emotions are just feelings, right, and nothing more. So why think that the dumb view is wrong? Well, first, emotions are intentional. Now, what it means to say that emotions are intentional is to say that they're about something, right? That when I'm sad when my pet dies, when my sadness is about a certain state of affairs or certain event, right? A thing that happened, namely my pet dying, right? Furthermore, it's a kind of a judgment that a certain event, in this case, my pet dying, is a bad thing. So sadness, in this case, is sadness about an event, and it's also a judgment about that event, right? A determination of the goodness or badness of that event. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that emotions are socially constructed. So what does that mean here? I know the kids today are talking a lot about social construction. But here's what Jaggar means by this. That judgments reflect what our culture defines as appropriate, right? So, for example, so when you're a kid, you learn to pursue certain things, that certain things are described as good to you, certain things are described as bad, right? And so we develop emotional reactions to these things. So our emotional reaction to these things are a result of our being taught that these things are good or bad, right? So in that sense, our emotions are judgments that reflect what the culture says about things around us. And because emotions are judgments, they necessarily involve concepts, like our ways of representing the world around us. And our concepts we get from our culture. So, in this sense, our emotions are socially constructed. They're constructed in that, first, we are taught as children what's good or bad, and we develop emotional responses to these things. And second, that emotions are judgments. Judgments involve concepts or ideas about the world, understandings of the world, sort of frameworks for thinking about the world, and these we get from our culture. So that was the second piece. Third piece, that emotions are neither active nor passive, right? Rather, Jaggar says that the active-passive distinction just doesn't really work well for emotions. Why? Well, on the one hand, we do in fact see emotions as passive, right? We experience emotions, they happen to us. But also, it's not like we can't shape our emotions, right? We can retrain our emotional responses. And so in this sense, we might think of emotions as active. They're also active in the sense that they help us construct and make sense of the world around us. So emotions are neither purely active nor purely passive. So what Jaggar suggests is that we think of emotions as being more like habitual responses, right? They're like our responses to the world, but we've kind of built them up into habits. And you can change habits, but it takes some work to do so. But also the habits help us make sense of the world. Right? Okay, so that's the third. Now, the fourth and fifth ones are related to one another, but we're going to tackle them separately because I think it's worthwhile to do so. So the fourth point is that emotions are bound up with our values. What does that mean? Well, it means that when we think about something as valuable or disvaluable, we're doing that based on an emotional response. A really clear example of this is with disgust. So there are certain things that we find disgusting, right? That when we sort of think about them, we get repulsed by them. Examples include incest, feces, decaying flesh, right? If you are like me, you go, whenever you think about these things. Hopefully you don't have to think about them too often. As a philosopher, I sometimes have to. So these emotional responses tell us that these things are disvalued. So our emotions, our emotional reactions are to something we find valuable or disvaluable. And at the same time, not only are our emotions responding to what's valuable or disvaluable, but there is value or disvalue because of our emotions, right? Something is valuable or disvaluable because we have a certain emotional response to it. So in this sense, values and emotions are really tightly bound up with one another, right? Something is valuable because of an emotional reaction to it, and we have certain emotional reactions because we find certain things valuable or disvaluable, right? They're connected with one another. So this brings us to our fifth point, which is that emotions are bound up with observation. So what do we mean here when we say that emotions are bound up with observation? Well, what we mean is that characteristic human emotions require characteristic human perception. So for us to have sort of the common variety of emotions that we experience, there has to be kind of a common pattern or common way of perceiving the world, of observing the world. And so we couldn't have the common emotional experiences we have without the common observations of the world that we have. Similarly, our observations of the world are informed by our emotions. Why think this? Well, just think of the vast array of things that you could look at or attend to at any given moment. You have to select what you're going to attend to. That is to say, the things that have value are the things that we attend to. And as we saw before, value is connected with emotion. So our observation of the world, the things we pick out in the world, the things we attend to, reflect what we find valuable. They reflect our emotions. If you want to observe this for yourself, just see if you can notice what grabs your attention as you're walking down the street. Right? So we have then these 5 features of emotion that strongly contrast with the dumb view of emotion. To wrap up, emotions are intentional. They are about something. Emotions are socially constructed. Emotions are habitual responses. Emotions are bound up with values, and emotions are bound up with observations. And with this view of emotions in place, or these pieces of emotions in place, we're going to see how emotion fits with knowledge.